Momentum is everything. If you don't have momentum, whatever you do, find it. Don't do anything that will not directly lead to you increasing your chances of finding momentum. That's, I guess, true in life in a way, but also so true, like double true in a startup. Not having momentum will put you in an energy deficit really quickly, and it will make everything feel grindy. And if everything feels grindy, you can only go for so long, and you need to be able to go like forever. The moments that I've felt most burnt out are the moments where we had the least momentum. Literally, it's a sine qua non, to say it with Latin words, which I guess translates to without it, nothing else. And that is so true. Fix that first. Like, momentum is like freaking air. Self-sourced momentum is not going to get you there all the way. There's inner and external momentum, and I think you definitely need to create inner momentum. I think that's the job of a founder, is to create this level of conviction that will bring other people along for the journey. It's like a rocket booster that's supposed to help you get to escape velocity, so it's super necessary to get the escape velocity, but at some point it's going to run out. Either your booster is going to explode, or you find a way to get outside momentum when a rocket starts using like the gravity of the Earth to propel itself forward. There's another force at play. And so I think looking for those other forces and launching yourself to be able to catch those other forces is absolutely freaking key in thinking about how you're designing your startup. That self-sourced momentum is necessary, but it will only get you so far. Just pay for the fucking course. Just do it. If you struggle a little bit before just trying to think out yourself, you'll pay a lot more attention in the course. I hesitated for such a long time to get a Figma course. It was like a $500 Figma course. I first got like a shitty course, like on Udemy, like $20. Didn't really do anything. And then I just got like the more expensive one, and literally took like a weekend to go through it. It halved the speed that it took for us to go from idea to develop. Just a weekend of investment to like accelerate that like crazy. So worth it. And I had the same for like the sales course. I was like following a bunch of YouTube guys explaining what a great sales process looks like for startups and blah, 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 and like reading a bunch of books. But honestly, just putting in the money, there's a different level of commitment. Also, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. I guess that's what to say. That's so freaking true. I think like now just with this sales course, it took me a weekend to go through it. And I have a super clear step process and a couple of scripts that are so good. The best courses are usually pretty short, but they give you the perfect amount of information and the right information. That is so worth it to pay for it. So a piece of advice to myself a year ago would be just pay for the fucking course. Like, you're going to go a lot faster, and that freaking matters. Like that, that 1% kind of change is learn how your reward chemicals work. Basically, dopamine, serotonin, all that stuff is freaking huge, because we're basically just massive meat machines, and that we just need the right inputs and outputs to be able to function in a great way. For example, I've seen this massive correlation with a shitty day almost always starts with me touching my phone within the first hour, even hour and a half of my day. Like, if that's one of the first things I do, I'm fucked. Especially when it's like going on something like, Instagram or TikTok or whatever. And then I think also just like thinking about how sleep is super important in that, and like how eating the right foods is super important in that. I did something called like Biome, like literally changed my life. Yeah, if I had known about that sooner, like just no brain fog, just no belly aches at all. The belly aches messed us up so bad. Okay, so learn how your body works, learn how your reward chemicals work, and just instead of trying to fight all that, learn to surf it. The longer you give yourself to complete a task, the more of that full time slot it's going to take up, especially in workouts, for example, like the interval training where like I do like a minute and a half works a lot better than number of reps, because like number of reps, I just take breaks forever in between, and I end up taking an hour for what could be like half an hour, just very intense workout. But so knowing really clearly what you're going to do with those time intervals, that works really well. Because if you can hit your time intervals, that's exciting, because that gives you kind of like momentum. What feels shitty though is that if you spend the first 20 minutes of that time block that you've blocked out figuring out what the heck am I doing, because of that you're missing the other part of the time block, and then you just can't give up on most of them. So being realistic in the time blocks that you set up, but then also being very clear on what you're going to do in that specific time block, I found is a thing that really makes a difference when trying to get like focused work done or work done quickly. And so now I started every night to just literally block out the next day of my calendar with the tasks that I need to get done. And I'm trying to like constantly measure how much time I think it's going to take and then how much time it ends up actually taking, so I can train myself to get better and better at estimating like the work and the clarity. Like literally before I would just write out a task, like now every single task that I write down, I try to look at, okay, what is the 1 hour block of this? So if I was like, for example, write investor update, I would break it down in write in like draft investor update in mind map, draft first one in Notion. That's probably going to take an hour, and then finalize a draft. That's probably going to take another hour. And then there's also a task, ask for feedback to, there's a couple of key people that I ask for feedback before I send it out. And those things like I literally itemize. Like my co-founder is even more intense, where he literally like will write out every single step, but it really works. Like having hyper clarity about what exactly it is you're doing, understanding that there's a certain linearity to getting things done, super key. And then a third one for today is narrative is everything. There's always a half full and always a half empty story. Always be the one telling the half full story. Nobody likes sad stories. Like however compelling it might be to try to just share how shitty you're feeling, or like how bad you're not necessarily certain about where it's going to go. Like there's always a way, and it almost never helps to tell the half empty story. So like really understanding that, not only in terms of like talking to investors, but just everybody around, and even to yourself. Like if always find the half full story, because narrative is everything. And I guess even especially for yourself. I used to worry about like coming across as delusional. I mean, this whole fucking thing, like I'm learning how to impact 1 billion people's life positively. And I know that I mean that. But I also have had like feedback around, hey, dude, are you fucking delusional or what? Like, or what's going on? And that used to like worry me or impact. And of course, there's the difference between narrative and conviction. And the way you build up conviction in your narrative is by attacking it from all sides. But when you tell your narrative, you have to tell it in a way that you fucking believe in it. And I think that's the job of a founder, is really to find the conviction. I think that's internal work. That's work that you do before. Those are the ones that I wanted to share for today. Peace. Thanks for hanging out. This is cool. I like this. This is fun. I guess bonus lesson for myself. Do things because you want to fucking do them. Yeah, I started doing this thing where I just recorded myself for myself first. And I think that's what gives it the freedom for myself, is just to be like, worst case, I don't share this with anybody, and this is just for me. And that there's a lot of freedom that comes with that. And I think that's what makes the thing interesting, because that makes it unfiltered and real. And yeah, as if I would just be talking to myself. Yeah, it's this paradox. Like as soon as you start thinking that there's an audience and you're being observed, like you start editing yourself in flight. And I think that's the worst thing. You can't, like if you're really create from the heart first and then edit after. Because like when you're editing in flight, that shit, it's like writing you wouldn't like sure if you're improvising, but like no great play, like no truly great thing is edited in flight, I would say. And even that, like even that's even especially impro doesn't get edited in flight, because you have this yes and mentality. You have to build on the other. Like you can't break down. Like I do agree that perfection is achieved when there's nothing left to take away, but first you need that burst of just fucking creation. And I think that needs to be unencumbered and not edited. Yeah, cool. All right, peace. If you can surround yourself with the right people and you know what you want, like I think you're fucking lethal. I was talking to a friend and she was trying to figure out, how she could get out of the kind of like, she realized, fuck, this is a rat race. Like I don't want to be in this. Like how can I get out of this? And so she called me, because apparently I give up, do whatever the fuck I want vibes, which I guess is not entirely wrong. But she asked me what do I do? And I realized that literally the first step is to surround yourself with the right people. That's half the work, because like I realized like the moment that I decided okay, shit, I don't want to be doing this thing in Belgium here anymore. You know, at my previous business, we just had like a strategy meeting with the board. I just presented like the strategy and how we're going to grow. I was super excited about the strategy. It was freaking cool. And in that strategy meeting, the board starts talking about billables. And that was a moment for me of like, seriously, guys. Well, I guess you guys don't see past that. Like, that was such a linear mindset for me that I was like, wait, if these people that I'm surrounding myself with have this linear mindset and I have this exponential mindset, that's not going to work. And now I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, with people surrounded, like all founders, all venture-backed founders. They all moved here to build their thing. And the standard question is, wait, how can your vision be bigger? Or like, how can you get to that next level? Or, hey, here's how I got like 1 million ARR in like literally a year. Those are the kinds of conversations that I want to have, like the 10x, like the exponential. And here, they're the standard. So like surrounding yourself with the right people is literally half the work, because you're going to start having different kinds of conversations. You're going to be thinking in different ways. And instead of wanting to defend your ideas that won't fit in anyway, you're not building upon them. The other part of the equation is know what you want. Like knowing what you want is the other half to like surrounding yourself with the right people. If you're not sure what you want, like the best way I can describe this is you know, say you're Michelangelo and you're like, you have a block of marble in front of you and you ask 100 people like, hey, what should I do with this block of marble? You're going to get 100 different answers. One's going to be, make some dolphins. The other's like, I like mermaids and make sure like the body's real nice. And then there's going to tell you something else entirely. But like, okay, I'm going to make the prettiest mermaid on the planet. And then you ask 100 people like, hey, how would you approach doing a mermaid? The kind of feedback that you will get is a lot more useful. And it compounds. And I think it's very much the same with life. Like everything good comes from compounding. So if you can frame your life in a way that every single thing you do leads to something. So for me, for example, like that, impacting 1 billion people's lives positively, that's because I know I want to have impact at that scale. And then there's also this problem that I've been obsessed with since like in 2013, I read a statistic saying that 85% of people are emotionally disengaged at work, and I think that's crazy. And so those two combined, like knowing at what level I want to play, like the scale I want to have, and then what types of problem I'd love to solve, that is literally like every single thing that I do compounds in that direction. Will I ever get there? Will I ever impact 1 billion people's lives positively? Who knows? But who cares? Because in the end, like it's all just like moving towards that direction, and that's the whole point of that thing. So I think it's important that it is like a goal that is like big enough where you could also, where it's not necessarily achievable, but where it's more about what kind of person you need to become. So I really think about it like about in terms of like, how can I become the person that can impact 1 billion people's lives positively? What skills, heart, and mindsets do I need? And that will probably never end, those lessons. I will always be learning about that. And that's super exciting because I get the benefit of like infinite compounding basically, which is fucking cool. Because yeah, all good things come from compounding, and rule number 1 of compounding is never stop compounding. So yeah, huge one. Those two combined, if you can surround yourself with the right people and you know what you want, like, I think you're fucking lethal. Everything becomes easier when you're genuinely excited. So fuck everyone who dampens or shames you for being excited. Everyone or anyone, like, sorry if I'm saying it that bluntly, but genuinely, like, I think like the worst thing somebody can do is dampen somebody else's excitement or shame it, or be like, because it's literally like everything. Like I, for example, I haven't been able to sleep in the last 4 days because I am so excited about a new feature that we're building, a new element of the business, and like a new kind of paradigm that we're going into, and that makes literally all the work, all the interactions, all of those things around it like so much easier and just freaking exciting. It's just super freaking fun. So why the heck not? Like that, like it's already getting momentum is the only thing that matters. I feel like excitement is a hack towards momentum. If momentum is like that, you get that booster to get to momentum. Excitement and feeling excited about something is like nitro gas added on top of that. Yeah, everything becomes easier when you're genuinely excited. So also that, like, how can you reframe things in a way that they excite you. I think that is work worth doing. Like I think like sometimes it's too easy to get into a grind mindset and be like, oh shit, whatever, I have to do this. Let's work through it. But if you can spend like 10, 20 minutes, even a day thinking about, okay, how can this be exciting to me? Huge, freaking huge. The small stuff matters a lot. What I mean by that is that my co-founder and I, we used to work. So we moved to Chattanooga together, Chattanooga, Tennessee, shout out to Brickyard, in like this founder residency thing to be able to work in the same rooms, because we were doing remote a little bit. Like he was working in Poland, I was working like all over the place, Belgium, London, like a bit everywhere. And yeah, we found it did work to some degree, but like we were missing like a lot of like who likes to be on a call and just fucking talk all day. Like that's rough. And so then we moved here to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and what ended up happening is that my co-founder ended up just spending most of his time working either in the engineering room here or in his room. And so we were in the same place, but we weren't really working together, like next to each other. And initially we thought like, oh, it's fine. Like we can still go for our walks, like do all that stuff. But the truth is it started to deteriorate. Like every interaction we had was almost like a heavy one in terms of we would only meet when it was necessary, which is almost the same thing as just like only like intentionally having a call. We started realizing like, wait, like we need to be spending just like random time together where it's just also lighthearted and fun. And so we started, because like he likes to have his alone time. He's a bit more introverted, like needs to just focus. Probably quite the opposite. Like I want to connect with people and just hang out. And I could still focus pretty well, but like he needs to be away from everything to really, really focus. And so we started like doing like half days together again, like in the same room. And it's a huge impact, such a massive impact. And the reason is that there's all these little stupid things that are happening throughout the day that if you can share them, that make it just more fun. Just more fun to do things like just, a stupid joke. Or, I don't know, something like I had a pretty shite customer call today. I just didn't go as I wanted. I don't think they're going to engage, but okay. And it's a lot more fun to just share that for a second instead of reporting at the end of the week, hey, of the 10, 7 didn't go well because product broke, blah, 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 blah. It makes that interaction a lot more heavy. So like the small stuff matters a lot. Like I think constant communication in every way, and especially if you can try to make it like lighthearted, do that. Like Second piece of advice would be to stick with it. There's so many times that it gets really tough, just really hard. Like you think, wait, am I doing the right thing? And then often you realize, wait, we're not doing the right thing. And then you look back and you're like, shit, like I've already invested so much time into trying this out. And then it turns out it's not the right thing. But that's the game. That is the game. It's trying to figure out what's the thing. And so if you can get your head around that and just like stick with that for example, I had a customer call that didn't go that well today. I was like, okay, great. How can I reframe this in terms of like, okay, what do I need to learn? Like, why didn't they respond like in the way that I was hoping? Like, what do we need to build in order to get there? Like, is this dependent on who they are, or should we change our product? So yeah, that understanding that is the game is super important. Because if you can design the game in a way that you can keep playing, that's when you really win. I think I know more than 95% of people that are thinking about this problem right now in the way that we're thinking about it, in terms of AI community, blockchain, and how those could be used within the context of hiring. So it's like this. It's the sticking with it. I think like all the good things are like come on the other side of just sticking with it. When to use IQ and know when to use EQ. And so a good heuristic that I've found is IQ is responding to what somebody's saying, and EQ is responding to why somebody's saying something. And so knowing when to use which one with what person in what context, like that is such a useful frame to think about, because they're like very often you can't get to the IQ parts if the EQ parts aren't figured out. So when somebody says something like and that you can clearly hear why they're saying that, respond to that first, because that person will feel a lot more understood, and then you'll be able to get to the EQ stuff of just getting stuff figured out a lot better and a lot faster.
Create an environment in which you force discussion in order to avoid them bubbling up later around like key topics. What I mean by that is today, my co-founder and I, we started writing this whole like co-founder agreement where we wrote down what we collectively commit to towards each other and as a team around key topics. And like key topics, like for example, work ethic, the way we communicate, what we can expect in terms of like responsibilities from each other. And it was very interesting because it unleashed some very nuanced discussions that would have taken probably months and have been probably taken out like months to play out. Where if you have 2 degrees of separation and you like that only like way down the line starts to be obvious. And because we had these intentional conversations, it really made it so much easier to have the conversation and also feel super aligned right now because we now have this document to fall back on and be like, hey, we agreed to this, we committed to this, like why aren't we doing this? So creating an environment, like thinking about the frameworks in which you want to operate is key. Like create frameworks for how you're gonna work together, like either with your co-founder, but then also team, but also customers. Like same thing with my customers actually. What saved me in our sales process is building this framework around how I want to interact and engage them, because that way that gives you a baseline in terms of how you want to engage and when you're off or on the mark. And so otherwise, like you're just like running in the dark and like your mark changes, and sure, your mark will change, but having that baseline in order to get your bearings is super freaking key. So remember that simplicity on the far side of complexity requires you to come back to simplicity. What I mean by that is basically like when you're going to make a sales deck, it's probably first going to be pretty complicated because you're trying to figure out what the best narrative is, and there's probably like 10 different narratives in there. But once you start going to customers with it, try out only one narrative. So instead of having a bunch of things on your slide, try to have one sentence. And I get that you need to go through complexity to get the simplicity, but simplicity is really the key. Like I also had this call with another like founder that's starting out, and they were like a McKinsey consultant. And so they were very prescriptive in the way that they were pitching. Like they had like very detailed slides, a lot of information. But that's often more for us than for whoever is listening. Because whoever is listening wants to be part of the story more than they want to get all the information. That sounds like you can send the slides afterwards with all the information, but on a call, it's how do you create a conversation where you start sharing your common narrative, and that requires that simplicity on the far side of complexity. Because if you didn't go through that complexity yet, it's very likely that the questions that they'll ask will just throw you off. But since you've gone through that complexity, you can guide them really quickly as to how this relates to the core idea that you've come to. If you're in an argument and the only way out for the other party is to admit that they're a dumb little shit, there's no way that argument will end into something productive. So asking yourself the question of, okay, am I giving this person the opportunity to change their mind in flight in a gracious way, I think helps a lot in determining how you're going to have your argument. And I think a great way to do that is to commit to, okay, what's the outcome? Like, where do I want to go to, and how do I believe that we can get there? So basically committing to, hey, do you agree that we're trying to get to this? And then they can often say yes or no, but that kind of gives them an out, and that changes the dynamic from you versus them, and the only way out for them is to say, yes, you're right, I'm a dumb little shit, to, hey, let's try to get to this common goal.